Psalm 130. God's forgiveness is simple. If is such an interesting word. It is such a small word with a possibility of a huge impact. Because if is a conditional clause, such as if I get COVID, if I could have been a better baseball player, if I would have been nicer, if I would have just listened to my teacher, if I could have seen my mistakes. See, if is a huge word. And the psalmist in Psalm 130 uses it. And we see it in verse 3, which says this: If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who can stand? What the psalmist is telling us is if God keeps track of people's sins, who could really say they're good enough? Who could really say that they should be in heaven? If God truly keeps track of all of our sins, who could stand against God, the God of the Bible? But then there's this word in verse 4, the word but. And you know which but I'm talking about. But is just as big of a word as if. It says this in verse 4. But with you there is forgiveness, that you may be feared. Forgiveness. Forgiveness with man is so hard because we struggle with it because of sin. Sin has made us more selfish, more proud, even more revengeful. So when someone does us wrong, which we've all been there, we've all done that, we're not instantly thinking, how can I forgive this person? Like, not how could I ever, but let me forgive you right now, right? Most of the time, if we're really honest, we're probably thinking more of the hurt and the pain when the person wrongs us. And then we start thinking about how wrong they were, of what they did and how they did it. And then we kind of sit back and wait for them, that person that wronged us, to come to us to ask us for forgiveness, right? If we were to be honest, that's kind of like more of the story, the reality. Or maybe we're the person that did the wrong. Sometimes people don't realize they've done wrong and they just don't see it. And if we do, there's that if word. If we do see it, see that we've been wrong, our pride kicks in, right? It tells us, it's not that big a deal. If they don't want to be my friend because of it, then I don't need to be their friend. Like, we just kind of make it okay. And that's like, I feel like the big reality when people wrong us in forgiveness. But with God, it's different. You see, what the psalmist is telling us about God is this. I think I really want us to understand this. God is always willing and wanting to forgive. Now, you may need to hear that again. Maybe that didn't sink in. Maybe that's just it's not there. Maybe you need to hear it again. God is always willing and wanting to forgive. Even though he knows all of our sins, right? He says he counts them, he marks them, he keeps track of them. Even though he does that, he still offers forgiveness, right? He is always forgiving. So much so that God himself came down to earth. Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us. Like, he came down to us, not waiting for us to come to him and ask for forgiveness. Like, he came to us so that we could be forgiven, right? Not that we had to say anything or to do anything. Like, he came living a perfect life, taking our place on a cross. Because of our sins, we owe God death. Jesus died on the cross so that God, the Father, would accept his payment, Jesus' payment, as the perfect sacrifice for our sin. Death on a cross. 3 days later, rising from the grave and giving life. You see, humanly, we wait for others. God waits for no one. He goes for it. Humanly, we don't want to lay down our thoughts, our fears, our hurts, or our pains for another. Like, we don't want to do that. But God, who is Jesus, does. He lays down his life. So we all could be forgiven. And then we come to verse 7, which the psalmist is who he's imploring this to, like he says this, O Israel, hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is steadfast love, like love that never stops, never ends. And with him is plentiful redemption. That there is plenty, there is such an abundance of redemption to be bought back, to make things right because of what Jesus has done. You see, it's a beautiful picture that God's forgiveness is simple. Sometimes we just skew it because we think of forgiveness from our perspective, which is really hard and difficult because we are sinners. But with God, he's all loving, compassionate, gracious, merciful. So much so that he forgives us. Not because we came to him, but that he came to us to forgive us. All we have to do is accept it, like he's handing it to you, and all you have to do is receive through faith in Jesus Christ. So the question is, do you? Do you believe in what Jesus has done for you? And maybe you already have. You know what? I still sin. I still disobey God. I still do things wrong against God and against man. Ask my wife. And so God helps me to forgive others as I learn more and more about how God's forgiven me. I pray that today, maybe there's something that you need to forgive somebody for, or you need to go to somebody to ask for forgiveness. I pray that today you wouldn't stop, that you would pursue, that you would receive God's forgiveness, and that you would ask for forgiveness and give forgiveness the way that God does for us. Thanks for joining me today on another day journeying through the Song of Ascents. In the notes, I was told this, it was a little hard to find. There's a little arrow sometimes that you gotta drop down they call it the notes, or the section where there's more information. It'll drop down and you'll see the link for the songs. But I have a song in here titled Forgiveness by Matthew West. I think you'll enjoy it. Have a blessed day. Until tomorrow, I'll see you later.